much for tuning in with me for today's interview with our amazing Lunar Wisdom author, the beautiful Amanda Norr. Now, Amanda is a certified moonologer. She is a healer and an intuitive. Her mission is to connect with and guide others how to work with the moon for healing and divine connection. Amanda loves working with herbs and oils and offers card readings that combine her unique blend of intuition and coaching to help her clients unlock, integrate, and embody the divine guidance that they receive. Amanda has lived on a dairy farm for 25 years with her husband, has raised two amazing children, and is the proud grandmother of two little ones. In her spare time, she's a volunteer EMT and firefighter. She's a licensed EMS and certified CPR instructor. So thank you so much for being with us here today, Amanda. And I would love for you to just, I know I've given you a big intro there, but if you'd like to tell us a little bit more about you and what inspired you to join us for the Lunar Wisdom book project.
Oh man, a little bit more about me. Well, that's probably everything in a nutshell. I remember when you messaged me about the Lunar Wisdom project, because we'd been, behind the scenes talking about the moon stuff, because we connected in the moonology thing, and I was just like, doesn't she know me? Like, I can't do this. But then honestly, not every goal I've been setting all year, but like every so often it's like bucket list stuff, and it's like, I'm gonna write a book. And then I'm like, I don't know what it's going to be about. And I don't know. I was like, but I'm going to write a book. And so I just sit with your invitation and mull it over for a little bit. And then I was like, yeah, I just need to leap. So, because that's the one thing that I have found is when I leap is when miracles happen. When I started going through my fire training and stuff, I mean, I'm doing stuff like the 20-year-old boys do. And I was just right before I turned 40. And that was really eye-opening for me, just because I learned that I could do things that I didn't think I could do. And I've been able to take that over the last few years, just going, well, I don't think I can do it, and then I just kind of make that leap. And then, of course, I shuffled some cards, did some readings, and it was like, I can't remember which ones I sent you, but the one was talking about like collaborative stuff, and I was like, oh geez, like okay. if a piece of cardboard could whack you in the face and be like, duh, then
it is funny how sometimes we do have, like you said, those little intentions that kind of pop up every so often. Oh, one day I'd like to write a book, one day I'd like to do this, but it's not necessarily on our immediate manifestation list or our immediate intention setting thing, but because we keep coming back to it, we keep putting that back out into the universe that this is something that we want. And it's amazing the things that happen and the opportunities that come to us when we continue to align ourselves with the vibrational frequency of that. And so I love the way that you kind of came back to it and sort of had a bit of a think about it, and then when you drew the cards, because this happens to me all the time as well. I loved how you said, if a piece of cardboard could slap you in the face, every time the cards end up basically reflecting exactly what's going on for me, or the things that we have perhaps not been admitting to ourselves. And so I love that. I think it's quite funny. And I do remember you sending through those cards. I feel like you pulled the same card twice in a row or something.
That was for like a different thing. But yeah, I did that too, where I'd pull the card, and a couple weeks later, it was like, okay, I'm like, I shuffled, like poker shuffled like a bunch of times, and like, and then like I pull a card, I was like, are you kidding?
Yeah.
Like, I just shuffled you back in. So I was like, okay. But then of course you're like, okay, but clearly I didn't get the message the first time, and I'm definitely not getting it right now, going, really? So then I pulled another card, and then I was like, okay, that makes a little bit more sense now. So
I find that that's very true of our experiences working with the moon as well, that cycle keeps coming around. Certain things keep popping up again and again for us to continue to work through or like acknowledge or whatnot in our journey, whether we like it or not. It's kind of like, oh, okay, clearly there's another layer to this, or there's a new facet of this that I hadn't thought about before, or things like that. Do you find that that happens to you as well?
Oh man. This one's a kicker. So that first quarter moon, right? I'm like in my house, we're having this. I go out and I'm looking at the moon, and I'm like big breaths, and I'm like okay. And then I was like, really? Because last month at the same shiz, I'm like really, and then I want to be mad, and I want to sit and I just want to be like, and I'm like, irony, like, okay, so now I have to kind of laugh, but then I'm annoyed, right? Like, it's just like,
Yeah, I feel that. It's that was one of the most fascinating things for me working with the moon, was actually starting to take note of those cycles and when it was happening, because for me it is those quarter moons. The first quarter moon often for me is like those energetic clashes with the people in my life. And then the third quarter moon is usually more of the internal clashes, like, oh my God, who am I to be doing this? Are you crazy? But yeah, it is that feeling of wanting to both laugh and cry at the same time, because you're like, oh my goodness, I'm so cranky, and then you're like, oh, you got me again, moon, thanks, awesome.
right? And you're just like, and you want to just be cranky, and you want to sit, and you're just like, just, and you're just like, then you can't, and you're like, ugh. I mean, and then it's not like I'm blaming the moon. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, the moon made me do it. But it's just really funny because there's also like, there's certain times between like the full moon, as it kind of getting up to there. And my daughter will be like, what is up with the moon today? Because like people are, and so it's just funny. So everyone's just like, what is up with the moon? I'm like, well, let me look. And I'm like, oh yeah, this. And she's like, I thought it was something.
I think that I love what you just touched on there. It's not that I'm blaming the moon, because it's not about blaming the moon or refusing to take responsibility. I think what it is acknowledging sometimes that the energetic cycles, really, like that maybe it's not so much about being mad at someone because of what's going on. It's actually recognizing that sometimes we need to let those feelings of anger go, that we don't need to keep holding on to them. And by the same token, it is also really important to allow ourselves to feel those things too, right? To acknowledge that, okay, yeah, I'm feeling pretty angry about this right now, but then also choosing not to hold on to it moving forward.
And it helps. I just feel like it helped because like now I'm just like annoyed at the moon, and like the moon did anything, an object in the sky. It's just like oh, geez. But it's just like, and then it was just like funny because then like I'm like, okay, like what sign is it in? So then like, I start digging down, like going into the astrology, like what house is it for me? What house is it for this other person? What's the sign? And I am like, oh, laws. Like, really, can you make this up? Like, you couldn't make this up on a, like, oh, I'm going to have the moon be in this sign and triggering this house, at this moment. And then we're going to have this clash. Like, you really can't make that up. And then you just have to like, oh, jeez. Okay, then, I was just killing me. I was just like, really? Like, I want to write, and I'm mad, and then the moon, and I'm like, but then I wrote a pretty good section. So.
Yeah, see, look, and sometimes it being the catalyst for us to really like lean in and access the other things, where you're saying like at the first quarter moon, it was in Scorpio, and Scorpio is like really intense, passionate, emotional kind of energy, but it is also really asking us to dig deep into to get to the bottom of things and get answers. And I love the way that quite often we're actually drawn to doing those things even when we don't know that that's what we're actually being drawn to do as well.
Well, and that was my thought on this last one, because first of all, my sun is in Scorpio and I have 5 planets in Scorpio. So, okay, let's throw a moon on top of that. And I'm like, and then this other person, his moon is in Scorpio with a rising sign of Scorpio. I'm just like, really? Because you really can't make that up. Like, I'm just saying, like, we are going to get
Well,
2 people full of Scorpio, and in this moon and on this day, we're just going to create this, I'm like, it just. So, but then the other thing, like, and that was what I was thinking too, is as I'm looking at the moon, and it's in the quarter phase, right? So it looks like the little half up in the sky. And I'm just like, well, what does the moon do? Right? Because if you're outside and the moon is shining, there's shadows. Like, it's illuminating, it's a light, but it's not like the sun. It's not like you can see everything, And then I remember this little story when I was little, and like the kid was like scared because in the moonlight, it's like it saw eyes and monsters and all these things. And then out in the day, the mom's like, well, this is, and then it's like, I didn't know, And so it's like, so to me, the moon, yes, it's illuminating, but it illuminates your shadows. And I'm like, really? I don't want to dig into that crap right now. Like,
oh my goodness. Sometimes the only way out is through, though.
so yeah, that's the fun times.
So
But I just was like the irony. I was just like, really, like this is just.
now I've been lucky enough to get a bit of a sneak peek at your upcoming chapter, but I would love for you to give everybody else just a little hint of what you are excited to be sharing with everybody in your chapter in Lunar Wisdom.
Oh, well, let's see. How do I not spill all the beans? Let's see. Well, I do talk a little bit about how, as a little girl, and you look up and you see the moon. And so, like, I always, like, I maybe didn't understand it because it was there. But then, just with the way I grew up and where I grew up, it's more black and white. And so there isn't that room for that, like, more nuanced kind of thing. Like, that there's always been kind of gray weaving through my life, but it was like, oh, but not that, because that's bad. And I'm not, and not that the moon was bad, but like when I was like learned that there was astrological signs and things like that, it's like, no, horoscopes are bad. Like, you don't, you know what I mean?
You're messing with things that are
Yeah,
beyond.
yeah. That's not the right path, right?
Mhm.
And there's right and there's wrong, and so trying to get more, so trying to be more in those, weaving in and out of those gray areas and things like that. And and I talk a little bit more about my story, but and then how I use the moon, because I really, it's some days it's just like I'm going outside, I gotta find the moon. I just need to look at it. I just need to like breathe under the moonlight. And so I talk about how I work with the moon, just in that visual space. But I've noticed, like, I have a hard time like really telling my story because I just feel like I'm getting my voice, right? Because I can't say things that, might upset people. Or it's my story, but because it doesn't agree with their, someone else's story, it's like, but my story is not wrong. So I'm just kind of like, I don't know, kind of towing the line and putting feelers out there of where my voice is, and what parts I can share, and like, and if there's things I can ever share or not share, like that's kind of where I'm at.
It is a really interesting part of the author journey, especially when it is your first book, to examine those parts of us, like what am I comfortable to put out there and share with the world, and what parts am I perhaps ready to examine, but I need to keep those pieces private to me because I'm not quite ready to share those yet, or I feel a little bit too vulnerable, or I'm afraid of what people might think. It's very much um, a part of the journey from going from somebody who, writes their thoughts and their feelings down but doesn't share them publicly, to deciding to actually birth them out into the world.
Right, right. And one thing that I did include was, and I wasn't like overtly specific, like, so kind of more, I talk about more on one, but I did get to a point with my mental health that I needed and use professional help. And so that's one thing that I did put, because if you're in a spot Like, don't be like, oh, I'm just gonna read this moon book and it's gonna make everything better. Like, if you need to, you know, connect with a professional, then connect with a professional and use, you know, I've seen enough, I've been around enough, and I've experienced enough that sometimes, as holistic as I've tried to be my whole life, and do all that, like, you, I just want that disclaimer out there. And in fact, my big thing is I'm like, everybody needs a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you have a general health doctor, everyone needs a therapist. We all need a general health mental as well.
I think that's a really good point too, because I'm personally very much about the overlap where science and woo are, like where they meet. And I love that these days there is so much of the esoteric, I think, that is supported by science. But this is one of those things that I think we do need to be careful about navigating, is actually that place where, from an ethical standpoint, saying, look, like, this isn't the only pathway, and we're not advocating that you ignore your health professionals, because it is really important, in my own personal beliefs, that we, with my coaching clients, before I got into publishing, even with my coaching clients, a number of my clients worked with me on, coaching things and making plans for the future and doing things like that. But while they were also working with a therapist or a counselor or something to unravel the other, like, their stories from their past, because while we could touch on some of those things, that's really outside the scope of coaching, right?
Mm-hmm.
So coaching is, as far as, the industry technical definitions, and of course the internet definitions on some of these things are a bit more blurry, but, a therapist is actually trained to deal with trauma and to deal with mental health and things like that, right? They've gone through rigorous education and ethical standards and, training and certification processes, right? And so they are equipped to handle all of the things that might crop up, right? And as a coach, it's not specifically my job or someone's job to necessarily to unpack all of the past traumas and things like that from the standpoint of trying to fix those things. Like, we can touch on them, but I do find, because sometimes it's important to recognize where we've come from in order to know where we want to go in life. But having that support, that mental health professional or something to deal with it, because I've seen a lot of people, and in fact, a girl that I recorded a podcast with last week had said she had worked with a coach last year who was encouraging her to do the shadow work, right, to unpack all of the things, and it actually triggered some of my friends' complex PTSD trauma from being in, like, a victim of a bombing several years ago. And the coach actually, like, didn't really have any support or any advice or anything in place to do it. It was kind of like, oh, well, unpack your shadow work and then you're on your own. And so she was then left with this, like, have this trauma re-triggered, but then with no support system, right?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously she went and sought help and support because she knew already that that was what her next steps needed to be. But there are certainly people out there who don't necessarily follow those same kinds of guidelines. So I really love and honor that you are being, what's the word that I'm looking for? Considerate of the reader and where they're at in their journey, and saying, look, it's okay to lean into the energetic cycles of the moon. It's okay to work with the moon. But if you are working through that shadow work, and if you are struggling with those things, it's okay to ask for help, professional help. That, there's doing this work can be enormously therapeutic, but it is not a replacement. It is more like an amplifier, I guess. Like, I always like to think of working with the moon and setting intentions as a way to amplify our intention setting and amplify our forgiveness and gratitude work and things like that. And so I honor your decision to make sure that you are considering and encouraging people to take care of themselves in the best way possible. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I was gonna say, like, I mean, and I've had medications, I off and on. And like right now it was really funny. Like I'd gone to I was talking to a therapist and I'd left my phone and an address. So I was like, can we look up the address to the liquor store? She's like, is that a good idea? And I was actually, I've made my own herbal tinctures that, and I just, study which herbs in which the calming effects and stuff. It was just funny because it was, so as I have on my shelf, like my own herbal tinctures and things and like, supplements and the different things. Cause you'd mentioned I work with herbs and I'd learned about that. I learned about that 20 years ago. Right. And then it was also kind of another one of those things that was like, well, does that fit with what my worldview right now is? And it's like, well, kind of, because it's natural, but then it's like, oh, but so there's so many things that I've dabbled and I've learned about and then I've shelved, and now I just like kind of like a shift. It's like, let's just pull that all off the shelf. let's do the herbs. Let's do the crystals, work with the moon and, like the correspondences and stuff. And then I find, one fun fact about me. So I love to crochet. And when my kids were little, I made my daughter an Easter dress. And then my son wanted a train sweater. And I'm like, well, how do you had a pattern for a sweater, but didn't have a train on it. So I had to get out the graph paper and, graph my own thing.
Draw the design.
Right. Make the design, entered it in the county fair, won a really big, cool ribbon with it. And it was funny because my aunt at the time, who was teaching me to read patterns and to do that, because I'd had like basic skills since I was 12. And she's like, she's like, I have to use the pattern. I can't deviate. And my whole adult life, you give me a recipe, you give me a pattern, and I change it. I'm like, it's just a loose guideline. And so that's what, going through, we did moonology, there's certain herbs and things. So there's loose guidelines, but then I intuitively like, pick and, you know what I mean? I just, cause I know if I think about it, like that's what's best. And so it's like, okay, well, it says this and this, but I'm thinking I'm going to use this and that, so.
It is definitely a skill, isn't it?
Yeah.
To be able to take the information and synthesize it and then add to it or subtract to it or change it and tweak it for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and it was really funny because when I started doing that with more of like energy stuff, I was just like, but I've always done that. I've done that with food and patterns and, and whatever. And like, if it's like the first time I ever do something, I might follow something exact. And then I'm like, where's it how I want? So I'm like, either I'm just amazingly creative or like I just am a rebel and I just don't follow,
I used to get so mad at my mom for doing that because like I remember when I was about 18 or 19 and I was still living at home, and I think I was doing Weight Watchers at the time or something like that. And so I had a bunch of the cookbooks. I was like, oh, like let's make this recipe for dinner. And my mom would just start like intuitively just doing stuff that wasn't following the recipe. And I used to get so mad at her. I'm like, but you're not doing this. Like, I think there was something that was like a zucchini slice, like kind of like a crustless quiche where it was zucchini and carrot and onion and things like that with eggs. And the recipe must have had something ridiculous like 12 eggs in it or something like that. And she was like, oh no, we don't need that many. We just need this many. And I was like, no, but the recipe says this. And I remember she's made fun of me for this a few times actually, because I used to get so cross with her because she wasn't following the instructions. And I think it was partly because then I didn't know, because I was trying to follow the instructions because it was like my first time and I couldn't understand why she was changing it or how she knew how to change it. But the older that I get, the more I find that I'm using recipes and stuff as rough guidelines where I'm then pulling together a bit like you. Oh, well, I've tried a similar recipe to this and I've done this and this is what I've changed and this is how I could make it better, or I think this would be a better combination of flavors, or I don't have this spice, so I'll substitute that one, or whatever. So I think those kinds of skills are really good. And I love that with this book, with Lunar Wisdom, the idea is to give people not just our personal testimonies, but to give them recipes and instructions and, tarot spreads and different things that they can use to work with the moon. But they're just a foundation. Like, these are not hard and fast rules. You can take this information, you can take what resonates for you out of our stories or whatever, and craft your own practices. And if you want to, like, once you have the basic foundations of understanding, like with cooking, once you know how to make a cake, you can mess around with it. When you have no idea how to make a cake, maybe, messing with ingredients, there's quite a lot of trial and error, right?
Right.
But it's the same kind of thing that you can take what we are giving you as readers and make it your own. So they can take what, like if you gave them a recipe, say for a tincture, and they were like, oh, but I really don't like rosemary, for example, but I love sage. Maybe I could do a similar kind of thing, but using sage as a base or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've done that too, where it's like you use the energetic correspondences maybe aren't quite the same as when you're using a spice for cooking. And I'm like, okay, like, but if I don't, like, what can I substitute for? Because, like, you're going through the cupboards and you're looking at, I don't have this thing. So, and then sometimes you're like, okay, well, the intent of that is this, and I have a different intention. And so I got to, work that to my intention. And that's the thing, I think, with intuition. And then when I work with people and I pull cards, or even when I just, like I'm feeling certain things, it's like, yes, I'm spot on. But then, like you said before too, like, I'm not a therapist. I don't have that other training. So it's like, you got to take what I say and use what you feel like, and then be responsible for, your choices and where you're going forward.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I'm so excited to see what kinds of things you pull together for the ritual spellbook section, because I think that's going to be so much fun to experiment and play with myself. I'm really excited to take everything that everybody's bringing in and have a little bit of a play and a dabble myself. Because
I know I'm excited about that, but like, I have all these ideas going in, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got so many. I'm like, so like with like how, like our word count that we have for that, I'm like, how many, like, here's me, like, not following the rules, and how many can I squeeze in? How many different things can I offer, but stay within the confines of the guide?
Oh, I love it. It's going to be so juicy. It's going to be so incredible. And I know that everybody, all of the authors that we have so far, are really just, the energy is so exciting because everyone's kind of like learning bits about each other. And it's like, oh my goodness, I can't wait to see what she has in store. I really want to read about this or learn about this. And that was part of what I wanted to achieve with this book, was not just that we were going to be able to give this amazing gift to the readers who want to learn these things, but also so that it would be the kind of book that we wanted on our shelves. Like when you look at your shelf and you're like, oh gosh, I wish I had a book that covered all of this or dived into this or had information about this, because this might not be my area of expertise. That we're like, oh my goodness, actually, even though I don't necessarily know a lot about herbal correspondences for magic, right? Or for working with the moon. I certainly do for cooking, but that I can then be like, oh, you know what? Amanda actually covered that. I can't wait to dive into her section. So I really wanted it to be a reference book for us as well, where we were not only giving our own stories to inspire and expand for others, but that we were experiencing that expansion and that inspiration from each other as well. So I'm so excited with how it is all coming together and all of you beautiful, amazing women. Like, I'm just absolutely floored by the caliber of contributors that are coming in.
Yeah. As a first time author, for me, it's like, I'm like, okay, but what if somebody else is going to kind of touch on what I'm touching on? And it's like, I don't, you want to be unique, but you also want to, stay with the realm of knowledge that you have. And it's just been fun as we've started getting to meet the other authors and stuff like that. It's like, well, even if we do write about the same things, it's not the same because, and you brought that up, like, we all do it differently, even though it's all, it's like the bones are the same, but all the stuff that builds around the outside is just, it's so different. So I'm so excited to read what the others are putting in, because it's just like, it's just going to expand what I know, and then, just take a piece. And that's the other thing too, is, maybe take, and I guess this is what I'd recommend for people to read it, is take the one section that you really resonate with, and then just put pieces in. It's like, don't feel like you have to like do everything, because even with Moonology and that, it's like, you can't apply every, like you have to take, you take the bits, and then that's like, for me, like intuitively, it's like, this needs to be the main focus, but then add these littler parts on to just add more clarity, or, make it a little bit more personalized. But it's like, you can't do like all the things all the time.
That's overwhelming. And you certainly can't start with all the things all at once. I think that's the thing, like picking the little bits that resonate for you, like taking a small part and learning to integrate and incorporate that, and then taking on another piece, even if it's not necessarily related. You don't have to just dive down one rabbit hole and stay in that rabbit hole. And that's the only rabbit hole you're ever allowed in. And it's like, well, I can dig a little bit of this hole, and then I can go and dig, like dive into that a little bit. And then maybe actually I'll go back to the first one and explore that a little bit more. And it's expansive from that point of view. And I love that by bringing together so many women who work with the moon in so many different ways, we are able to demonstrate that there is no one way to work with the moon. Like, the only way there is to work with the moon is your way, as in the way that resonates for you as an individual, which means that there are, billions of ways to work with the moon. And you just have to pick and choose the pieces that you want to create as like your building blocks and your foundation, and how you want to bring that together, and how you want to work that in your own personal practice. And I love what you were just saying, like find the piece or find the story that resonates for you and allow yourself to immerse in it, because working with the moon is not an academic thing, in terms of you can't just learn the theory without doing the practical. To work with the moon, you really do have to get out there and do some things, try some things, be wrong, be right, work out what you don't like, work out what you do like, discard the things that aren't working for you, and lean into the things that you love doing, because that's the only way that you can really and truly make that connection, that deep connection.
Yeah. And then you hit a bump, and then you start going, okay, what's the sign? What's the, and then you're like, really?
And it is funny the way that our even our own energetic cycles of moving with the moon, like sometimes we really feel connected to our own practices, and then sometimes we kind of need to take our foot off the gas and like give ourselves that time to rest and recuperate, where maybe we aren't diving as deeply into the rituals and practices that we had been incorporating but then again it comes full cycle again, and then we dive back into it when we're ready, and that's totally okay. It doesn't make you any less of a practitioner. It doesn't make you any less connected to the moon when we need to take those, like that self-care time, that time to, sometimes we need to rest and integrate, right? And sometimes that means like just allowing ourselves to slow down and do nothing.
Well, and like that was like one of the thing that I talked about, right? Because I mean, clearly the new moon is when the new moon is, and the full moon is when the full moon is, and that can get really stressful when you're like, on the new moon, I want to do, and on the full moon, and I'm like, hey, a couple days before or after, like when it works in your schedule, because I don't know anybody that doesn't have to worry about other people.
Mm.
So, I mean, if your kids have something or you something with your spouse, like you could get that stress of, or you can plan in a way that like that's your self-care time, but either way, you're not like on this rigid, it has to be this way. Like there's allowances. And
Mm.
so, I start thinking ahead because, looking up, just because I want to work certain things in, like I want to write down intentions at the new moon, and I want to write myself a nice paper of what I want to forgive and what I want to release because I want to burn it. I'm a firefighter. I like
Love it.
So, I mean, yes, we put them out, but sometimes we start them and and I like, and so I mean that's a big thing for me is my dish and my papers and like that. And so there's certain things that I want to have happen, but I can't be so strict that I stress myself out because that defeats the whole purpose.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes we have to give ourselves the grace and the space to just be exactly where we're at. So, if you had one piece of advice to give to somebody who might be considering perhaps coming on board or stepping up and sharing their story of the moon in the Lunar Wisdom book, what would you tell somebody who had never written before and was considering this journey?
Oh, well. First of all, I think we all do have a history of writing, right? Because we all went through school. You had to write something at some point. So, so don't go with the, like, oh, I've never written anything because you probably did. But if you feel, I would just say if you're passionate about it, and you just even feel just a little bit of a nudge to go for it, I just say go for it.
I love
So
that.
you
I think that,
build a really good community, and as you bringing us together, I think that was my big thing too, is because a lot of times everyone talks about how being an author is so solitary, and so that's kind of scary. But this isn't a solitary thing, and we're learning and collaborating together. So, don't be scared of the solitary thing because it's definitely not. Just if you got a little bit of a tug, go for it.
I love that. I love how that dovetails in so nicely with what you said at the very beginning, where you were like, oh my goodness, who am I to be doing this? Like, who am I to write a story in a book? I'm so, like, I'm scared to take that leap of faith. And then you were like, nope, just do it. Like, take that leap, and that when you did, then amazing things sort of started happening. And I very much agree that we all are writers, whether we realize it or not. And I love that you illustrated that with, in school, we all had to, whether you enjoyed it or not, all did, like English or English literature or, like short story writing, writing essays and whatever else, whether you went on to university or not, we have all done writing at some stage. And we all have thoughts and feelings and stories of our own to share, right? We have our own personal experiences. And so I'd just love you to touch on for a second, like what it has been like for you to actually go back and re-examine those stories from that you've included, like you talked about when you were a little girl. What was it like actually going back and actually re-examining some of those things as you were going through the writing journey so far?
sometimes we don't think about, so you think like, I think a lot of times we have thoughts and desires and things as kids, but because we're kids, clearly somebody else is in control of our life at the time, right? So you even you can have the best parents in the world, but you have to make decisions to survive, and when you go back and you start revisiting some of those things, you're like, I've always been that way. I've always like and so for me, as I'm finding my voice again, right? And you've talked about it on other things, like when you're a mom and you're a wife, like in our society, basically, it's like you disappear in the service of others. And so as I'm like finding my voice and I'm like going, and then I'm going back and it's like, this is who I've always been. I've always liked this. I've always been drawn to this. And so it's like almost like rediscovering. And then you kind of feel like a child again, because you're rediscovering these things that lit you up that you had to dim.
Mm. Oh, that's so great. It definitely, I know we've talked about this before, and I know I've said similar things in other places, but it is very much that feeling of coming of coming home to ourselves. Like I love what you said, like rediscovering exactly who we were and that we've perhaps always been this way. We just got lost for a little while on the journey because other priorities may have seemed more important or been more important, or we've been encouraged to follow a different path. But that this is one of the things I think that comes with really reconnecting with our divine feminine, is that we recognize that these are parts of us that actually are intrinsic to who we are and how we connect with the world and what we feel about different things, without even having to consciously do it, that it's really more of a subconscious connection that we've already always had, but that now it's much more about us becoming aware of it, becoming aware of those connections, becoming aware of who exactly we are and who we were always meant to be, and that we haven't changed. We've just actually become ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, you know, I followed my society's prescription, right? Like I did all the steps. This is what you do. This is what you get. But I never got what they said. I never got what I was supposed to get. And so it's like, I'm keep hitting this brick wall. And it's like, what's the deal? But then finally you get hit in the face enough that you're like, okay, hold on. And then you start, like you said, you start coming back into yourself and find things like, well, okay, well, this is what lit me up. Why did I stop doing that? I really liked doing this. Why did I stop doing that? And you start bringing those things back in and you're going, maybe sometimes the prescription was written by somebody because it worked for them, but it isn't meant for everybody.
Oh, I love that. And that goes very much, I think, ties back into we need to define our own paths and we need to find the practices that work for us, because even the way, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to showcase so many different stories from so many different women working with the moon, because it isn't a prescriptive path, right? There isn't only one way to do it. There are many different ways to do it, and we have to find the path that resonates for us. And sometimes that may or may not necessarily conform to what society's prescription is for the path that we are meant to follow. And it also certainly seems to me that as we become women of a certain age, that the desire to conform to society's expectations of who we should be, and perhaps even who we have been for a long time, which is probably a generational thing too, because I feel like a lot of the women that I'm meeting these days who have grown up in a different generation to us are on a very different journey. They've had access to many different things, including different access to resources on the internet. And, obviously social media has been a part of their lives, perhaps since teenagehood or, even middle school or primary school, where for us, like Facebook, for example, I think I joined in like 2007 after I'd had my son and before I had my daughter. So I was already an adult. I was already a parent. And so even though I like to think of myself as fairly, I used to think of myself as fairly tech savvy and computer savvy in terms of having been, the internet became a thing while I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
But the level of resources that were there, even like when we were having kids compared to when women have children now, is completely different. Like the resources we had available wouldn't even hold a candle to what the level of information that you can access these days. And so I think part of it is also that, like as we as women of a certain age are realizing that we have so many more choices than the ones that we were given in the first place. I also like to think of like our parents as well. Like I know my mom, when she finished high school, it was in the days where if you wanted to go to you basically became a teacher or a nurse, right? Like those were your two choices.
Or secretary.
Yeah, or yeah, or a secretary. There just weren't as many career choices for women, and so my mum went off to teachers college, and she became a primary school teacher. Her younger sister went and became a dental nurse because those were, like those were the choices that they had.
Mm-hmm.
And then the youngest eloped with an American Navy sailor and became a military wife. So, like they got the whole spectrum, but they didn't have the same kinds of choices that we do. And the choices that our daughters have and that our granddaughters will have and things like that, I think are going to be completely different again. But what I really do feel personally is important is that by bringing together all of this knowledge and this wisdom that we're sharing, like in days gone by, it was, the collective wisdom was shared throughout communities, right? It was handed down from generation to generation. And at some point, that became unsafe to do. And so here we are, these cranky women of a certain age, or no, these inspired women of a certain age.
Yeah, let's say we're inspired. Cranky
Yeah.
fit. A lot of rage. There's a lot of internal rage that
So much divine feminine rage. Are coming together, and we are sharing the things that are important to be shared, that not even just that we need to know and that we need to learn, but the information that our daughters and our granddaughters need to know and need to learn for their journeys as well, like as they become women and as they grow older and raise families of their own and things like that, that these are lessons and ways of being that do have the power and the opportunity to actually allow them to come into themselves earlier than we did.
mm-hmm.
Right? To find themselves before they lose themselves.
Well, and one thing that I have found on this path too, um, and I've visited with like a lot of women is, and it's like, why am I so angry? It's just because you just sometimes, and certain things come up and your blood's just boiling, right? And uh, everybody talks about the stages of grief, and they talk about it in losing a loved one, but when you start awakening to things that you've either suppressed yourself or have been suppressed for you and you're angry, there is a grief. There is. You go through all the stages, I mean, and it isn't a linear path. You go step one, step two, you get down, you're just raging, and then finally you're tired and it burns out and you can breathe for a little bit, and then all of a sudden it's going to something lights it back up, and then you're sad, and you're just like, and you just feel like you've lost things. And then not everybody goes through that, but don't you feel like you're going crazy, but you're really not. So it's like, grieve what you think you lost, grieve what you gave up, you know and pick up the book and find something that lights you.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
it can be an intense journey sometimes.
Oh, so much. And I think that's one of the things I love most about working with the moon is that it actually gives us that opportunity every cycle to lean into the gratitude and forgiveness work, the leaning in, the being angry, the letting go, the recognition of what we are grateful for, that time to breathe, that time to step back, that time to be quiet, but then also that time to step up and do and be active. And whether it is fueled by divine feminine rage, like to get things done and to change things. And I mean, let's be honest, with some of the things that have been happening in the US at the moment, there is a lot of divine feminine rage out there, and it is spurring women on to take action and make changes that need to be made, because this affects all women. And so it is, working with the moon, I feel personally, does allow us that time to channel and harness that effectively, to feel all those emotions, to feel the need to get out there and do the things and take it into our own hands. But then that time to actually pull back and, and cry and rage and set things on fire and, do the things that we need to do without judgment.
Yeah, and I have months over and over that it's like I come back to the same month and I'm writing out the same thing that I need to release and the same thing I want to let go. And I'm like, really? I'm here again? Because I might have to do that. I might have to do that. I might have to do that every cycle all year long. I might, because some stuff just is deep and some stuff doesn't go away. And I'm just like, it's fine. I can repeat. That's the cycles repeat. Just keep going until.
Mm-hmm. And that is part of it, is that I think a lot of people perhaps don't realize, when it comes to manifestation and forgiveness work, not everything can be released in one moon cycle. Not everything can manifest in 14 to 28 days. Sometimes, and especially when we are releasing like fear and trauma and hurt and anger and things like that, the longer that we have been carrying it, the deeper that wound is. It's like having a splinter, right? And you might, if you pull out a bit of the splinter, but part of it breaks off and it's still in there, or if it's gone through too many layers of skin, you've kind of got to wait. As the wound heals, like some of that skin just continues to keep peeling, right? Because you're unwrapping new layers to get through to the point where you've actually excised the whole thing, right? And it's like that with forgiveness work. It is like that sometimes with manifestation, particularly with forgiveness work, that we unwrap layers of it. And once we unwrap and release that layer, then we're ready to dive into the next level. Like that we can let it go, but then it brings up new challenges and new fears, doubts, angers, betrayals, memories, whatever. And that it is a constant cycle of renewal and a constant cycle of leaning in to do the work, and that's okay, that it is just an opportunity to take that deep breath and breathe through it and recognize and acknowledge and say, okay, here we are again. What do I need to learn this time? What do I need to let go? Like, how can I change things? How can I view it from a different perspective? Who do I need help from this time? Like, what is it bringing up for me that I need to work through? And then moving forward from there. And, again, same kind of thing when we're trying to manifest, right? We're trying to bring things into our lives. Like, say you want to buy a new house. We don't always find the house of our dreams and have it close in like 14 days, like from new moon to full moon, right? Sometimes
22 days and we got it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes. But usually when you actually look at the journey, it's like, and manifesting the money to pay the deposits and searching through the, like the availability of the housing ads to actually find the right ones, and going and doing some home viewings and working out which areas you want to live in and working out what features are important. And it's like a refining process, right? So sometimes we just need to, like we obviously can't necessarily get the mortgage until we've got the deposit. So we need to work on the deposit first before we can get the mortgage.
Yeah.
We need to actually find the house to know what the price is, to know what we need to save.
And depending, and you don't want to like box yourself, but sometimes it's like the bigger the thing, the longer it can take. But sometimes.
Yeah.
So you have to be that open, that be realistic, but then be open to, but something cool might happen that I don't expect.
And sometimes it comes in a different way that you expected. Like sometimes it doesn't look like what you imagined it would look like. And I think recognizing that sometimes it's that saying like this or something better, right? Sometimes something better might not actually look like what you expected it to. And if you're not open to it, you might actually be repelling the very thing that is meant for you because you are so fixated on what you think it should be rather than what actually is.
Yeah. Or yeah, it should be the one thing versus the other. And it's funny because like I just know for me, I'm pretty good at getting, like smaller, medium, kinds of things. Sometimes the larger things because it's not just you. And so those ones are kind of hard because it's like sometimes your energy and somebody else's energy is butting up against each other. And you're like, yeah, it's like whatever. Um, and then sometimes it's just like the assertiveness. I know like last year, so I had my daughter got married earlier this year, and I didn't have a job last year and Christmas was coming and I'm like, okay, I don't even have a job. So, but how am I going to get money for Christmas and money for a wedding? And I just kept writing down the same, like, however this shows up, however this shows up, however this shows up. And then when it came and I was just like, okay, so now how do I tell my partner, like, this is what it's for and we're not, because we have clashy ideas on things. And so then it was how do I manifest like my own energy in a way to say what I need to say. And so, then it was like, hey, like this happened. We do have this much money now, which was the exact amount I'd kept writing for months and months. And I'm like, and this is what we need to do with it. So, and that kind of thing. And so, but it's just funny because the first time you start writing, okay, I'm jobless, but I'm going to come up with this dollar amount. You really don't know where it's coming from. Like maybe I'll get a job miraculously, but you just open it up and.
Yes, and money does come to us sometimes in very unusual ways that we don't expect. And I think that's where people actually often get caught up and block themselves from receiving because they're not recognizing that, like exactly what you said, I don't care where it doesn't matter where it comes from. I don't know where it's going to come from, but I'm open to receiving it however it comes.
Yeah.
Whereas when people are being so specific, like that it has to, that they're going to get this job or they're going to get this promotion or they're going to do this without leaving room for something better to come in or something unexpected to come in or whatever, it can sometimes like sabotage you in different ways. And a group that I'm in, someone was talking recently about setting some financial goals that they wanted. Let's say it was like $10,000 to come into their life in the next week. And they're like, so I've got, $5,000 worth of client calls or client contracts that are due to be signed this week. But I have no idea where the other $5,000 is coming from. But, I just written down that there will be $5,000 in my personal account by Friday. And just left it open for the universe to bring it however it wants. And I've seen people then have things like unexpected tax return checks or unexpected, literally checks pop up in the mail, or that it turns out that they've signed new clients or that they've come into money in other ways. They've had like a lotto win, or they've had a refund from something that they weren't expecting come through, or they've sold something that has been on them, that they've been advertising for sale for ages and ages, or whatever it is. And they're just leaving that room open to be surprised does often bring those miraculous kinds of outcomes when we are
it's fun. I remember one exercise I'd learned, it's probably 25 years ago, was just that just build up that excitement and just be like, something really exciting is going to happen today. And like, you don't know what, just build that up, because then you're expecting something. And then whatever happens is probably going to be exciting,
Yeah, I love that. And it's such an easy way for us to manifest, right? Where we're just like, something amazing is going to happen today. And then when something happens, that gratitude automatically floods you because you're like, oh my goodness, it happened. Like, you'll never believe the most amazing thing happened to me today. And we really anchor in that frequency of receiving and that frequency of abundance and prosperity and gratitude and joy and love, because we are open to it. And we're telling the universe that we are open to it. Right. And I know that sounds super woo, perhaps, for some of the people out there that are like, well, you just can't wish for like $5,000 to be put into your account. But
well, I actually did. If we're gonna be specific on amounts. So I was like, but I was also specific. Like, I needed that amount, and I needed X amount for the wedding, and so much for Christmas. You know what I mean? Like, I even had it sectioned, and it did happen. Like, and when it came in, and it came in months enough ahead of time, I was like, oh, good, no stressing.
I love it. That's so good. Okay. Well, Amanda, do you have any final words of wisdom that you would like to share about either being an author, about the book, about anything, and about where people can find you if they'd really like to follow you and learn a little bit more about your process and your wisdom and your magic?
Oh, well, I'm working on being more findable. But currently you can go to Facebook at Live Life on Purpose, Be Intentional. And then Instagram, I believe I am Norr.Amanda. And I did, because Instagram's been having issues with, a lot of people that I follow and all these fake accounts. And so it is Instagram is private. So you would need to actually talk to me like a human. and have a normal looking thing. But the Live Life on Purpose is a good place to go. And I just say keep in tune for this book coming out and for the launch, because I've got a really exciting thing to teach in conjunction with the launch. And I will put on the Live Life on Purpose, I'm developing so that I can, gift a PDF and have a website there. I'm so new in this, but I'm excited because I was like, that was the one thing with this book. I was like, if you do this book, it's actually going to get me to do things that I need to do that I don't know how to do, but I have resources. And so I'm really, really excited about that. So yeah, just kind of stay tuned with the book, because I'm going to be growing with the book.
I love it. So I will link all of your links for Instagram and for Facebook, so that if people want to follow you, they can find those links in either the show notes or in the comments below. And I have no doubt that we will all be excited to see how Live Life on Purpose and your business unfolds as we move through this journey, and that we are all very excited to be reading your chapter and your wisdom in the Lunar Wisdom Project. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Amanda, and for sharing a little bit about your story, and for really giving us the opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into the realities of working with the moon and how sometimes that looks for us, and the challenges that it presents, and that we quite often need to keep coming back and revisiting things, because I think that's one of the things that a lot of people perhaps leave out of books and things, like, is that it isn't just a one and done. It's not like a magic wand, right? We don't just get to wave it and all of our traumas and pains and things disappear and all of our desires just magically accumulate in front of us on a silver platter. And I love that you have been so open and honest with us today, and sharing some of your vulnerabilities and some of your wins and amazing manifestations with us. And I know everyone will be really excited to read your story as well. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, Tracy.
And if you have really enjoyed tuning in with us today, stay tuned, because we will have more interviews with our other Lunar Wisdom authors coming up over the next few weeks. If you would like to become a contributing author for Lunar Wisdom, please do feel free to reach out to us. We currently have a few more spaces available, and we would love to hear your story and add it to our collective wisdom, because like we said, there is no right or wrong way to do it. There's just however you are doing it, and your story might be the next one to inspire somebody else. So thank you, everybody. Have an amazing afternoon, and we look forward to catching up with you again.